We started a series 2 weeks ago called God Swears to Keep His Promises. And the whole premise of it is the fact that he can't go back on what he initiates and what he instigates and what he starts with us. He can't go back, which is such a oddity as to the reality of when we find ourselves in doubting moments. Isn't it such a frustrating thing to be a human being? Anybody else frustrated of your humanness? We have all of this evidence of God's faithfulness and His goodness and His power, and yet we still are like, God, are you going to come through on this? Are you going to come through in spite of me? And he has to, because He started it, and He finishes what He starts, and it's so refreshing and such a good thing. I want for my life to every day that goes by, I want to get better at trusting Him, period. And so we're on this series about covenant. And now the reason why we did God Swears is because whenever the word covenant is thrown out, at least in my brain, I just immediately start thinking formalities, and I just get hung up on words. But it's a very powerful thing, this thing, covenant. And so in my verbiage, and I'm borrowing the title from a guy that many of you know who are going through OSL, Pastor Jerry Dearman. He coined this phrase, and he borrowed it from the Bible, so I guess we're all good. But God swears to keep His promises, and so we're looking at the narrative of the Bible and seeing how we're seeing all of the different promises that God swore to us, swore to keep, and how those are meaningful for us today. What we need to understand, it was really helpful for me to have this understanding when I'm going through the Old Testament, is that everything that happens is a foreshadowing and a shadowing of what is to come. And so we look at how things literally happened in the physical, in the natural, but what happens in the physical and natural it's not even a reflection, it's a shadow of what's ahead of us, or what was ahead of them at that time. And so it was helpful for me because it helped me to approach Scripture differently, not just like, here's a bunch of crummy things that have happened, why have they happened, where are the answers, so on and so forth. But you look at it and you're like, holy smokes, this is mind-blowing, that there is an eternal spiritual element to everything that happens throughout the Old Testament. Not only that, but when Jesus was here and everything that He taught us, even His life and what He promises us here now is a foreshadowing of what else is next. It's crazy. And so what you're going to find, if you haven't figured this out already, this is no new message to those of you that have been in church your whole life, you're going to contend for and fight for this battle of perspective, where yes, we pinch ourselves and it hurts kind of thing, and we realize that we have natural bodies, but eventually there is a more eternal destination for all of us, a spiritual realm that we can't see but we know is there because God talks about it, Jesus talks about it. It's called the kingdom of heaven. That's more of a stable reality than the reality we live in now. And we have to contend for that understanding. And that's what our whole life is. It's refreshing being around skeptics because they question things that I didn't think to question when I was a skeptic. And you kind of have I just have this inner smile. I don't smile at them because they would think I'm mocking, but I'm just like, just wait. Just wait. Be a skeptic, but just wait for God's love to hit you like a flood and help you see eternity. And then you're just ruined from that point forward. You're just ruined. There's no turning back. All right, so I digress. Genesis chapter 12, we're going to go through chapter 12 all the way to 15. More than likely, we're not going to get all the way through the message today, which is totally cool with me because it just means that we're going to take more time on what really matters. Y'all good with that? I just know it's going to happen because I didn't finish during the first service. So here we go. Genesis chapter 12. We're going to read about a guy named Abram, not yet Abraham. And he comes up on the storyline several generations after Noah. I loved looking back through Noah and everything that happened when God just, not that I liked that God wiped people off the face of the earth, but I love searching for his kindness and his love and all of that. Now, they hit dry land, they come out, and then God says, be fruitful, so they start having babies and multiplying. End of story, right there. There you go. You have generations of baby production, all right? And living and tending to the land and making a living, all that kind of stuff. And so we have the genealogy in chapter 11, and then we come to the end of 11 and introduce Abram, and he's just a guy whose dad, his name's Terah, and here we go. We're going to start in chapter 12, verse 1. This is so out of nowhere. I mean, this is even later on in Abram's life when this happens. So the Lord had said to Abraham, Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land that I will show you. And right here, I just want to push pause. I love and I get frustrated at how God leads sometimes, or all the time. He says, go, and I will show. Isn't that interesting? He shows up to Abram and he says, go. Leave what's familiar. Leave what you've worked around all your life. Leave your comforts. Leave your family that you used to do your holidays with and all that kind of stuff. Leave that and go to a place that I will show you. He could have in that moment just been like, I need more details. I'd like more details, please. Who's going with me? Where am I going? And how is it going to be feasible for me to do the going? I need those answers. I need the what, where, how. When seems kind of like an option, but I need to know those details. Does anybody else converse with God like that? I'm sorry to tell you, but when God says to go and you don't know the details, don't run with this, please. I'm not talking about running from things that you know you shouldn't be running from. But when it's clear when he says go, go. And I guarantee you this, that you're not going to have the details that you wish that you would have before you go. Period. Just know that there's no better place to be in your going than when you're going with the directive and the presence of God. What difference does it make where or how or why or what? It doesn't matter. None of the details matter so long as you know who you're with. Period. And so somehow, some way, God has this, he speaks to Abram in this way. His life has been happening because we read here that he was 75 by the time he left. So I'm not 75 yet, but I feel like I've walked with Jesus for a little bit of time. And for those of you that are 75 or thereabouts, just know that God is not done with you. You have breath in your lungs and you're able to get around. Listen, mobility is not an excuse because they have little rascal scooters or hover around thing. You can go places, right? We live in a day and age where you can go. So when he says go, even if it takes you longer to get there, it just means that your journey is going to be more sweet because you got more time with him. Go. Go. I'm going to show you where you're going. I love this next section. This is what we've got to take this as if God is saying this to us today. Because what God wanted to do through Abram, it's really what he's speaking not only through Abram, but his seed, which we are of his seed. Which means that what God was saying to him, he wants to do in and through us. This is what God says. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. There's nothing wrong with striving for and desiring to live a life of greatness. There's a difference between living a great life and a conceited life. For whatever reason, I think that immediately we think that greatness equates self-centeredness and ego and all of that. That's not what he's saying. I'm going to make your name great. Don't be bashful and don't be ashamed to live a life of greatness and strive for greatness. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples, on earth will be blessed through you. Do you get the impression that what God wants to do is be a blessing through you? It's crazy. So my question immediately in this conversation here is, to whom are you being a blessing? Now, I'm not saying where you show up in the room and be like, hey, y'all, the gift of God's here. You're welcome. I'm here. How can I bless you? I think it's a little bit more tactful than that and not as tasteless. But seriously, where are you supposed to be going, and who are those that are there that you're supposed to be a blessing to? Some of you all practice, you know legitimately. Let me just throw out some things here. Some of you know that you're supposed to be visiting group homes where people don't have the luxury of just immediate mobility. You're supposed to be going. So go. Some of you are supposed to be visiting hospitals. Go. Be a blessing. And, we could list off a bunch of other things. Wherever it is that God's saying to go there. And just share the God that's in you with them. All right, so he says that you're going to be a blessing. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to make your name great. And you will be a blessing. Peoples on the earth, they're going to be blessed by you. Okay, we got it. So now that exchange happened. God said, go, I will show. I'm going to bless you so you can be a blessing. And then we have this, I would imagine if you were of the family or the people that belong to Abram, if at first it's really exciting, like, oh man, like they had to have this nomadic DNA in them, right? We're going away from all the comforts of family, and we know that we're going to be a blessing, and so we're just going. Where are you going? I don't know. This is going to be cool. We're going to figure it out along the way. Super naive, right? And so in verse 4, so Abram went. He just went. Where are you going? I don't know. I'm just going. I don't know. So he took his family, his wife, his nephew Lot went with him, all the possessions that they'd accumulated, and they set out. They set out for the land of Canaan. And in verse 6, and Abram traveled. He traveled some more, and then he arrived at a place. He arrived at the great tree of Moreh, and the Canaanites, they were living there in that land. Without Abram even pressing into God and seeking God's face, it says this, that the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your offspring I will give this land. Well, that's interesting. God he just shows up and speaks to Abram, saying, your kids are going to inherit this land. Now, it probably would be a benefit to know, if you're not familiar with this story, Abram and Sarai don't have kids at this point. They're 75 and they don't have kids. You put the things together there and see how probable his thoughts were about having kids ever, right? So he's like, I don't have any kids. I have to think that was going through his head. Nonetheless, what happens? So he built an altar there to the Lord, the one who appeared to him. God speaks this ridiculous promise, and Abram's response was, I don't want to forget this, so I'm going to build something that helps me remember what God just spoke to me. I want to push pause here as well. Some of you, God has spoken some things in and over your life, and you've forgotten them because you weren't disciplined enough to write them down. You need to be more disciplined of writing the things down that God speaks to you. It would actually do you really well to spend some time in asking God, can you show me again what you spoke to me? Because I know you spoke to me in years past, but I was irresponsible with what you gave me, and now I want to be responsible and write them down and build my own altar of sorts. I want to remember what you've spoken to me. What has he spoken to you? One of the things that I love about Summer and pretty much every aspect of her life is a target that I hit because I'm just not there yet. So, by the way, yesterday morning, I forget where the shirt came from. It was like #married up, right? I definitely want to buy one of those just because I definitely married up. One of the things I love about Summer is that she documents our life very, very well. And what's refreshing about that is that when moments get tense or they get heated or they get and heated by the way of, God, are you really going to come through on this? Like, we think we heard you say that you want us to go, but are you going to be faithful and be true? I know Summer has questioned, like, is Josh really the one that you've called me to live with? So I need to read back through what you spoke about him. And what those words do is they anchor your soul into the truth of, yes, who God is, but more specifically, they anchor your soul to what he said about you, that he's going to do through you, what he's going to do for you, and how you're going to be a blessing to others. Everything that God says to us is never just about us. Never. He speaks selflessness into us. I love that. All these great redeeming, restoring works that he does in and through us, guess what? It's not just for you. There's a bigger narrative always to what he's doing in your life, your marriages, your relationships, the healings of past hurts. There is a much larger narrative always. Write it down. Write it down. So he makes an altar. Guess what he does next? From there he went. By now, people are like, so, is this what this is going to be like? Abram? Oh, we're just going to go places and God speak to you and you throw some stones in a pile and then we go some more? Now, mind you, they didn't have like the pop-up canopy tents that, popped up on top of a Jeep and where they just could pack up in just a little bit of time. Like, they were moving stuff. They were moving animals. They were moving stuff. And it took time to bundle it all together and hit the road. I would be one of those that are like, so what else is there to this trip? From there he went. He went towards the hills of east of Bethel, and he pitched a tent there, and at that place he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Nothing, no response from God there. But he called out to him. He built an altar and called out to him. Maybe if I put some stones together, he'll speak again. But there wasn't. So then Abram set out and continued toward Negev. Now there's a famine in the land, and so Abram went down to Egypt because I guess there's more stuff down there, so they went down there. And this shows you how strong of a man of God he is. He speaking of married up, like he was the first one, like hashtag married up, because Sarai was apparently beautiful. And, Abram's 75. We don't know what the age difference is, but she's pretty, and he knows it. And he's like, listen, so if I go in this region, if I go to Egypt, Pharaoh's going to be like, Sarai, you're pretty. You're beautiful. I want you for me. And so Abram's like, he knows what's going to happen. So then I just imagine how awkward this conversation is. I would never, ever have this conversation with Summer. Maybe like, Summer, so we're going to go somewhere where somebody's going to be like, she's hot, and I want her for me. So I know that's going to happen, so let's just be like brother and sister, okay? Like fist bump. Let's do it like a sibling handshake so it can look like we're siblings. So he goes there, and this is what's funny. In verse 14, when Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was very beautiful, and when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. That's a weird statement, right? They praised her to Pharaoh. So they were singing about her and like just lifting up her name and her beauty and all this kind of stuff. So that wasn't the Pharaoh song that we teach kids. It wasn't about them coming out of Egypt, like let my people go. It was like, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, oh, look at that woman. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So he looked at her and he's like, I want her. And Pharaoh treated Abram really, really good because of Sarai. He got some cattle, he got some camels, he got some slaves, or servants, male and female servants, male and female donkeys, all kinds of stuff. And then something happens. Pharaoh starts getting sick, like with a gross disease. We don't know what it is, but he gets struck with a gross disease. And he comes to the realization, like, bro, that's messed up. Like, she's your wife. Why would you tell me she's your sister? You're weird. And so he says, get out of here. He instructs he gave orders. This is in verse 20. Pharaoh gave orders about Abram. Like, he didn't even want to talk to Abram. Like, hey, guys, come here. This dude's messed up. He told me that his wife was his sister, and so I wanted her to be my wife, but now I got these gross diseases, and so I'm giving these orders to tell Abram to go. Now, Abram has all kinds of wealth from Pharaoh, and so I wonder if there was ever a face-to-face interaction where Pharaoh and Abram were talking, and Abram's like, so you want me to go, do I get to keep the stuff? And I'm sure that Pharaoh's just like, bro, just go. Get the camels, get the donkeys, and go. So he, through weird deception, acquired more stuff. I don't think that was God's plan, but it just kind of worked out that way. So we move into chapter 13. Guess what happens? So Abram went again. He just went. He's great at two things at this point in his life: going and building altars. If we add a third, he's great at deceiving. Well, where do they go? Well, they just kind of wander around. Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. From Negev, he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier. And listen to this. And where he had first built an altar. There, Abram called on the name of the Lord. At that place, their first stop. The place where God first spoke to him. Why do you think he meandered and just kind of found his way back to where he first started? He didn't go back home, but he went back to the first place where God spoke to him. It's not the first time that God spoke to him, but it's the first time that God spoke to him about having children and gaining an inheritance. I want to go back to that promise. See, that's why it's so significant that we write some things down. Whatever it looks like to make an altar towards the things or for the things that God has spoken to you, you have to do that, because in your wanderings of life, you're going to hit these moments that no matter how much wealth you have acquired, you can still be incredibly lost. And you've got to have these things in your life, these altars and these words that God has spoken to you, to re-center you on what he wants to do through you. He did a great job wandering around and acquiring stuff, but he still had no idea what God was going to do, how he was going to do it, when it was going to happen. He had no idea. But I do remember this place where God spoke to me. I'm 75. He talked to me about having kids. I want to go back to that promise. Now, as they landed there, it became evident that Abram and Lot, they both were getting wealthy and getting a lot of stuff, and the land wasn't sufficient to handle all their animals. And so they agreed. They're like, okay, Abram said to Lot, where do you want to go? You get first dibs. Where do you want to go? So Lot's like, I want to go there. And so they go. Then, after Lot leaves, God speaks. I don't know why that's significant, but it's in the Bible. And it wasn't until Lot left that God spoke. This is in verse 14 of chapter 13. Then the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had departed from him, look around from where you are, to the north, the south, the east, the west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and the breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. Same message, just a little bit more detail. You're going to have kids, and this land's going to be their inheritance. It's interesting at this point in the story here that we've not yet read where it says that Abram believed and it was accredited to him as righteousness. Same message over and over again, and we'll find that there's a third time where God shows up to Abram and says, you're going to have kids. This is going to be their inheritance. See, we can hear God's word all day long. It doesn't mean that we've bought into it yet. See, that's God's speaking. God speaks to us all the time. Some of us aren't great at hearing him. And then if we are good at hearing him and we like what he's got to say, we immediately become skeptics. It's like, oh my gosh, God's speaking to you. Why would he speak to you if he wasn't going to do it? So why do we immediately jump to skepticism and wonder of like how it's going to happen? We just need to believe that in his timing and in his way, that what he has spoken will come to pass. Well, what does Abram do? So Abram went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents, and there, because it's all that he knew to do at the time, he built an altar. Now, I'm not going to go through all of chapter 14, but what we have here is the region of where Lot was living. It got ransacked by 4 different kings, and he was captured. Abram got word of it. Just to tell you how bad of dudes that Abram raised up, it only took 318 of them to get Lot and his family back. So you have 4 kings and the force of their army and all that they had, and Abram's like, hey, you 318 trained men, go. Actually, when you read through it, Abram was one of the 318. 75 years old. Tell me he wasn't sprightly, right? He could still handle business. They go, they get Lot. This is such a cool story, though. I mean, I'm not reading it, but let me just share with you. When they're coming back, the king of Sodom comes out, because that's where Lot was living, in the region of Sodom. The king of Sodom comes out because he wants to pay respects and give a reward to Abram for setting the people free. At that same moment, this guy who has no genealogy, and he's the priest of Salem, which eventually becomes Jerusalem, the high priest of Salem, a.k.a. Jerusalem, comes out at the same time. Abram says, hey, king of Sodom, hold up. Priest of Salem, let the priest brings out bread and wine. They have communion together. It's a covenant meal. Abram gives him a tenth of everything, and then he turns his direction to Sodom, the king of Sodom. Now, it's such a quick blip, and we at the beginning of the year, we taught on this, or we went through this. It's so good to go through the Melchizedek. Sodom tries to pay rewards and also get some from himself for himself. So the king of Sodom said to Abram, give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. And listen to what Abram says. Abram said to the king of Sodom, with raised hand, this is covenant language, with raised hand I have sworn an oath to the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, in case you didn't have a title for him, that I will accept nothing belonging to you, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men that went with me. And he lists off the names. He says, let them have their share. But as for me and my house, we're not going to take anything that you have to offer. We're not going to receive from your generosity. I've sworn an oath not to take anything from you. Now, we don't know how long after that happened, But it says after this in chapter 15. After this. See, Abram just lived out the promise that God spoke over him. He says, I'm going to make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great. See, Abram didn't go in to rescue Lot so that he could get more stuff. He went in to rescue his family member because that's what family does. And he received no reward and no accolades, no props, no kudos for it. He simply wanted to go do that. That's a great man right there. I don't want any credit. I just want to do work. After that, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. See, the king of Sodom might have had some stuff to offer you as a reward. But Abram, I want you to see that I am your very great reward. Keep living for me. Keep holding on to what I'm speaking to you. Keep moving forward. Keep doing all of your goings. I am your very great reward. I don't know if threats were made to Abram, like you stuck up son of something or other, and you are this, that, and the other. You just wait till I come at you. We don't know what words were spoken towards Abram, but God spoke boldness and courage into him at that moment. And from here, we have the third time when God says, you're going to have kids. Sovereign Lord, or Abram says, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me? I'm sorry, God doesn't speak for a third time, but Abram's starting to get a little bit agitated at these promises. So it says, but Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus. He's a servant in my household. You've given me no children. I'm tired of hearing the promises. I've been wandering around, and I'm tired of hearing this. Essentially, what Abram is saying is, what's the point of giving and blessing if I don't have an heir to give it to? What's the point? Is all this being given to me so that my servant can inherit all this? Then we have the third time where God says, you're going to have a kid. You're going to have a child of your own flesh and blood. And then he took him outside. And God says, look up at the sky, count the stars, indeed, if you can count them. And he said, so shall your offspring be. And finally, here's this big moment that Hebrews writes about. We have this big moment where finally it says in verse 6, Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. That whole journey, all of those things that Abram had just gone through, it wasn't until this moment that he believed. He also said to him, I'm the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of it. And in similar fashion to what Todd spoke about last week, but Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? I know you're able, but are you willing? I know you're able, but how will you? I know you're able, but how can I be sure of it? See, I passed over the whole part about bringing him out of Ur, the land of the Chaldeans. God reminded him, saying, Abram, you are here in the comforts and the confines and the relationship of family, what was familiar. For generations, that's what your family did. They just had babies, worked the land, made a living, and had next generation after them doing the same old thing. And God's saying, I brought you out of that. because you're looking at things from a natural point of view, a very limited point of view. And I'm bringing you out of that so that you can have a scope on eternity. And again, we need to be reminded that this is a parallel to what is happening in the spiritual. God does that in your life. This is what I would say about what we all have in common. We were all born. Our moms gave birth to us. And we all have different stories of, some of us have super dysfunctional upbringings. Some of you don't know your parents. Some of you might have been adopted. But nonetheless, somebody somewhere along the way raised you. And there are family cultural dynamics that we all have. Some of them are good. Some of them are indifferent. Some of them are just downright evil, and we're working them out of our lives. God is working those out of our lives. What we all have in common, though, is that God is helping us go from what's natural and what's temporary to start seeing what's going to last forever. There is a different dominion, if you will. Right now, right here, we can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't see into it. But it's there because it was there before the beginning of time. And God's saying, I want to pull you out of what you know and what's natural, and I want to bring you into eternal understanding. And the Bible says this, that there is an inheritance that we have yet to get. And in the same way that Abram didn't step into that inheritance until he believed, we don't step into that eternal inheritance until we believe as well. And all along the way, until we enter that inheritance, God is almost like this relentless glue that wants to pull us back into the natural stuff, our family stuff. I don't want to make this decision because I'm going to offend a family member. God doesn't want us to think that way. He doesn't want us to be jerks about it, but he doesn't want us to get stuck in what once was. He wants to bring us into his promises that are good and pure and holy, and what we've got to do is get to a place where we believe with our whole being. And I'm not going to jump into the rest of this because I'm going to save it for next week, but what takes place next? Everything that has been happening since the first moment that God spoke to Abram is all covenant. God came at Abram, said, I'm going to bless you so that you can be blessing. Whoever curses you, I'm going to curse. People are going to be blessed because of you. That's God initiating what Abram's life was going to be. That's him stepping into a covenant with Abram that has everlasting impact. And then at each stop along the way, all these different conversations that God has with Abram, it's all covenant language. And God's trying to get us to a place where we stop being skeptical and we step into believing what he wants for our life. And he cannot go back on his promises. Life may feel like you're just wandering through a desert. But can you be encouraged this morning that there's no better place to be if you feel like that than if you have the knowledge and the understanding that you may feel like you're wandering through the desert. That may feel like life to you, but I would not want to be any other place than with him. So keep wandering, going from place to place, build your altar, stand on what he has spoken to you, and be relentless in believing what he's spoken, and just be okay with him being your great reward. Amen? Grab your connection card this morning. I'm going to give about a minute or so. I once was, I now am. The encouragement in the first service that I gave was this, that, man, I'm super careless sometimes with the things that God speaks. And what I think he's speaking to me, I can be careless with it sometimes. I want to get better at documenting what he speaks to me. I also want to get better at building altars. Not that I plan on making my backyard a pile of rocks, but I want to get better at capturing these moments when God speaks so that I can just confidently move forward and confidently step into the life that he's called me to live. But what is it for you? In all of this that we looked at this morning, what is it? There were no points. There was none of that. But what is it? I once was, I now am.